I will never forget this night. The pizza place I worked at was closing and I was getting ready to go home, when the phone rang. I was working alone at the counter that night, so I picked up the phone. There was complete silence, so I hung up after about a minute. The phone rang again. I was about to hang up. I hung up right then. I heard a very weak and cold voice from an old woman on the other end. She said she wanted regular pie deliveries. I was being polite on the phone, but inside I was screaming. I just wanted to get home and finish my shift. I called my boss to see if anyone was requesting a delivery. He told me I had to go. I was annoyed at first, but then I realized it was another tip and the old ones usually tip the most, so I decided it was okay. I wrote down the address and told him it would be there soon, but he had already hung up. I thought it was rude, but I ignored it and yelled at the chef that I needed a regular one. My boss told me to go home after delivery because the place was okay. It would be closed, so a little before 10 I got in my car and entered the address into my GPS. The house was 7 miles away. The GPS took me to the quiet end of town. I arrived at the house. It was a small one-story house and a very quiet and empty block. I finished eating my pizza and went to the door and rang the doorbell. There were no lights on in the house. I hoped he hadn't given me the wrong address. I rang the doorbell again. Still no answer. I was about to give up. When I turned my head I saw someone standing by the window. I was a little scared at first and looked back, but eventually I went to the window and saw that the person was an old woman, probably in her late 70s. She just stared at me blankly. I yelled at him that I had pizza. He didn't respond to my words. So I yelled even louder. A big smile appeared on his face, not a pleasant, genuine smile. I still get chills down my spine, remembering the look on his face. Looking out the window, I decided I had been scared enough and got back in my car and put the pizza on the passenger seat. I needed to text my boss about this. I sent him a quick text and started my car. I looked to my right for another look. I saw the woman standing right outside my passenger side window looking at me the same way. I parked my car and drove down the street. She had been looking at me the same way since I drove to Florida. My boss had never asked me to make a late-night delivery again. 4 years ago, when I was still in high school, I was asked to make the last delivery of my shift. I got in my car, which was a 1999 Camry, perfect for pizza delivery. My phone had the address GPS. I live in the countryside upstate, so all pizza deliveries were long drives. I remember the sun starting to set, so it was probably around 7 o'clock. I would say, after driving through the woods for about 15 minutes. I said I had arrived. It was an old little cottage, almost a lake house. Made entirely of wood, it sat all alone in the middle of the woods. The lawn was completely unkempt because the grass was about knee-high. I was used to this kind of thing, so I didn't think much of it. I took the pizza to the front door, even though there was no door, so I knocked on the door hard within 10 seconds. I heard footsteps. The footsteps reached the door and stopped. I started to feel uneasy. I felt like the surveillance was on, and just then I noticed a crack in the door. It was the pizza guy. I called out. I heard a low, husky voice from the other side of the door. He was telling me to bring the pizza out again. If something didn't feel right, I didn't want to go back there. "Sir," I called out. He didn't answer my question. The footsteps hadn't moved away from the door, so I thought he was still watching me. I almost turned back to my car, but I decided I didn't want any trouble with my boss. The last time I brought the pizza back, he had shown me attitude, so I reluctantly walked through the uncut grist and looked around the small house in the back. There was a shed and a small porch. On the porch, a table with 4 chairs around it, one of the chairs facing away from me. I saw someone's head sitting on the seat. I started walking and said, "Excuse me," but the guy didn't move an inch. "Excuse me," I said again loudly, then I heard him behind me. Here I turn. I turn around and see a guy sticking his head out of the corner of the room. He's looking at me with a crazy grin. "Come here. I want to show you something I've been scared of." I turn around and run around the house in the opposite direction. For some reason I was still holding the pizza in my car. I started my car and drove away. On the way back to the pizzeria, I started the car. I pulled over to the side of the road and called the police. I was eventually told that there was no sign of anyone having been in that house for a long time. I quit my job. Delivery job. A few days later, I don't know what would have happened to me if I had approached that guy, but to this day I want to turn my head to see who or what we were. I'm sitting in that patio chair. This particular shift I was making late-night deliveries. When I was doing this job, I lived in the Poconos. It was very rural. I often found myself driving down the road, surrounded only by trees, just like at night, only dark and foggy. This time I was driving a shortcut to town. I had to slam on the brakes several times, when I saw someone jump out of the bushes and onto the road. A painful thud and thump from the front of the car confirmed that I had hit the person. I was cursing myself with my hand on my forehead. I couldn't believe what had happened. I hit one of the people. I got out of my car to see if they were okay. It was a guy in a black hoodie, the hood was up, he was standing next to my car tire. I didn't know what to do at this point. I was panicking. Why was this guy nowhere? Why did he jump in front of my car, and then the situation got even weirder? I could hear screams. Screams for help. Coming from the forest to my left. Someone was in trouble. I looked at the person I had hit with my car. He was still frozen to the ground. I would just leave for a minute. I thought that for some stupid reason, I thought it would be okay to leave the man behind. The forest I walked towards where I had heard the screams, expecting to hear something else, but there was complete silence. Except for the sounds of night creatures. Where are you? I shouted. Just at that moment I heard the sound of leaves crunching on the ground. I turned towards the sound, and even in the dark and foggy weather I could see the shape of someone hiding behind a tree opposite me. I ran back to the car as fast as I could, looking back repeatedly, making sure no one was following me. When I got back to the car, the man I had hit was gone. I didn't think about where he was anymore. I got back in the car and drove down the road. My heart was racing the whole time. I drove, but I was still delivering the pizza when I reached home. When I rang the bell, a middle-aged woman answered after paying. I noticed that her eyes were focused on something behind me, and then she asked me if they allowed your delivery partners. Now I was confused and asked her what she meant, and she told me that there was someone in your car. When I turned around and saw someone, I felt a pain in my stomach. I was sitting in the back seat of my car. I used the woman's phone to call the police, and they arrived shortly after, but the person in the back seat of my car was already gone. The scariest part of this whole story is that the police found a bloody knife on the floor of my car where the man had been hiding. This memory still haunts me every day, and I can honestly say that it is extremely painful, even imagining what the situation would have been like if I had not delivered.